Hi everyone, Charles from the Food People here. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. It's my great pleasure today to welcome Alejandro Franco, co-founder and chief commercial officer of Kaffe Bueno. Today, we're going to be talking about coffee, but not drinking it, more about the value and its potential beyond just a caffeinated beverage. There's hidden value all through the coffee supply chain, and no more so than in the grounds themselves. And that's what we're going to be exploring today: the purpose, the products, and the exciting journey so far for Kaffe Bueno that they've had in this coffee meets biotech space. So welcome, Alejandro. It's great to welcome you.
Thank you for inviting me, Charles.
Um, At the Food People, we're very clear about why we do what we do. We're champions of change, driven every day by our intent to shift the future of food and drink by harnessing the power of trends. And in this In Conversation With series, it's all about talking to people and brands and businesses and entrepreneurs across the food and drink spectrum to find out more about why they do what they do and how in their way they're championing change and shifting the future of food and drink. And you're definitely doing that space. You're definitely doing that in this space, Alejandro. So great to be speaking to you today, and let's get started. Could you perhaps start by just introducing yourself and just giving us a little bit of an intro to your backstory?
Yeah, sure. I'm one of the founders of Kaffe Bueno, and Kaffe Bueno is a Danish bioscience company upcycling coffee byproducts into ingredients for different industries, such as personal care, nutraceuticals, food and beverage, pet food, feed, and agrochemicals. Basically, we use a combination of green chemistry, biotechnology, and nanotechnology to break spent coffee grounds and other coffee byproducts into their composing molecular building blocks, and then use these as ingredients or precursor of ingredients. And a little bit of the story.
Mm.
Well, we started Kaffe Bueno 7 years ago in Copenhagen. Clearly, I'm not Danish, and neither are my co-founders. The three of us come from Colombia, and about 10 years ago, we were doing our bachelor's in London, and in there we met, like, most of our friends were from Scandinavia,
Okay.
and we noticed how crazy they were about coffee, and we thought it was a little bit funny, but we thought it was interesting, the different perception that we all had of the same thing.
Yeah.
They saw it as a caffeinated beverage, and we saw it as many different things. For example, growing up in Colombia, you see your grandmother using it to dye their hair, or if you fall down and get a wound, they would put coffee grounds on top of the wound. And I know how it sounds pretty like third world type of shit, but it actually worked. And when we were in London, we started realizing also how wasteful that value chain is.
Yeah.
Going to so many coffee shops and seeing all the spent coffee grounds being thrown away, we started looking into what happens with those coffee grounds. Usually they end up in landfills where they decompose and generate methane, which is a lot worse than CO2 for the environment. Actually, the emissions of all the coffee grounds, if they were all thrown into the landfill or decomposed in a landfill, would be equivalent to about 40 million round trips from Copenhagen to New York in a plane. So it's a lot. And so we started thinking what could be done with coffee. But on the other hand, we were also intrigued by how come a coffee shop owner in London can run a lucrative business while the people we owe the existence of coffee, the farmers, cannot even cover their costs. Particularly 2015 throughout 2017, there was a price crisis in the coffee industry where coffee farmers couldn't even cover their costs because of the market price of coffee. So we thought, well, something is wrong here in this industry, because all companies say that they are paying farmers pretty good, above average and so on, but then you go to a coffee farm and everybody is extremely poor. So either all of the companies in the world are lying, or the system doesn't work. And we refused to believe that all companies were lying, because at the end of the day, it's humans. So yeah, we started remembering our grandmothers doing weird things with coffee, and then we started asking ourselves what is inside coffee that help reduce inflammation on a wound, and what is inside coffee. And we found out that, as opposed to what most people think, coffee is much more than caffeine. Caffeine is less than 1% of coffee. The rest is antioxidants, fatty acids, proteins, sugars, a lot of health promoting compounds. And we found over 100 clinical scientific papers associating those compounds with increased health and prevention and treatment of different cardiovascular, neurological, and skin conditions. So then that led us to start researching different technologies to to extract those compounds, because when you make a cup of coffee, less than 1% of those end up in your cup.
Yeah.
And that led us to Denmark. Knowing that Scandinavians drink a lot of coffee, we started researching into all of the Scandinavian markets, and we found Denmark to be the right one, because of its focus on biotech. It's a biotech hub.
Yeah.
And well, their consumption of coffee per capita is one of the largest worldwide, and it has a good recycling infrastructure.
Can I just ask, you've touched on a number of points there. What do you see, what's the fundamental problem do you see with the coffee supply chain as we know it? Where is it going wrong, do you think?
There are many problems. But as we see it, and we continue to believe this is the main problem that nobody is tackling, is that farmers are paid for the 1% of their crop. So no matter, to make a cup of coffee, basically, because how does who buys the beans from them? Either intermediaries that aim to sell it to coffee roasters and then process them to sell a cappuccino, espresso, whatever that may be. So the COGS for them, it's the raw material cost of coffee. And those are the only people buying coffee right now. But if coffee was being used for all of its potential, not only the 1%, naturally the price of raw material would increase. And farmers would get more value out of their crop. But then there's a lot other problems. So like water usage in the coffee farms, or monocultures, pesticides use. Actually, 80% of coffee's value chain emissions come from pesticide use.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different problems. We're tackling one that encompasses a couple of them.
Yeah, okay. And for food and drink, how can coffee be broken down, and what are some of the, I guess, compounds that can be extracted from coffee grounds for application in food and drink?
So coffee has a substantial amount of lipid, which we extract. And that oil can be used for different things, from bakery and confectionery, also in glazes, as a flavoring agent, but also helping emulsify emulsions. And then after we take out the oil, we're left with some fibers. We sell those as a kind of as a flour, but a fiber-rich, protein-rich flour. But then we have, like, those are the two products we have been selling for many years, or two ingredients. But we have developed a whole biorefinery process that allow us to make more than 17 ingredients out of coffee. So from the fiber and from the oil, we continue breaking them apart into single molecules or compounds that then we can use in the food industry for different things. One of them, for example, is a prebiotic fiber with some other benefits. I'm reluctant to say a lot because we're launching them relatively soon, so I need to keep some for us.
And are there any compounds that, I mean, I get that there are compounds that you could perhaps swap in and out, perhaps from a petroleum-based product to a natural product. So there's some natural swapping there. But are the compounds within coffee that are unique to coffee that you can't perhaps get anywhere else for application in food and drink?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like everything that we take out of coffee can be a one-to-one replacement of different compounds in the market. But coffee, because of the roasting process, there's a chemical reaction that makes amino acids and sugars bond, and then new chemicals are created. And those chemicals are very interesting for different applications. They have a lot of different properties. So maybe not unique to coffee, but coffee is one of the rare superfruits that has these compounds.
Obviously, without giving away the secrets of what you do, what is it that you do? You know, coffee grounds come in to your operation, and then what happens? Can you just kind of bring that to life to us? What do you do to extract those compounds?
We use a combination of technologies, some that are widely used in the market, some others that have been adapted by us. But what makes and that, let's say, that black box process is what we keep as a trade secret rather than patenting it.
Yeah, okay.
What we focus on protecting in terms of intellectual property is how we use those molecules. But what differentiates us, I think, is, well, no other company in the world is attempting to extract or valorize coffee in this way. We're focusing solely on health-oriented applications. And maybe now there's some other companies popping up, but we started this movement, and we have the first mover advantage, to say it some way.
No, I get that. For the food and drink industry, what are some of the benefits or upsides of using your compounds or ingredients versus perhaps an alternative source?
For example, if you look at, let's take the case of Kaffe, which is the flour.
Yeah.
If you replace a malt extract from rye bread, well, or maybe a little bit of context, but in rye bread, they use malt extract solely for the purpose of color.
Yeah.
If you replace malt extract with our ingredient, you can achieve the same color at the same concentration, but then you increase the fiber content, I think it's like by 60% or something like that, and protein content by 11%. And then you can extend the mold-free shelf life by 7 to 11 days.
Right. Okay. And
that's one example, yeah.
And is there I guess a sustainability upside for companies as well, potentially using your products?
Yeah, of course. We're doing 5 LCAs for some of our key molecules and benchmarking with industry alternatives.
Yeah, okay.
And we have seen, for example, in the case of our coffee oil versus argan oil, which is widely used in cosmetics, but also in food, the emissions of our oil are 10 to 20 times below the ones of argan oil.
Yeah, okay. And you touched on a couple of different applications there. I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit, just from a food and beverage point of view, to really bring to life for the audience how these ingredients can be, the variety, I guess, of different ingredients, and how they can be used in different applications.
Yeah, so for example, if we look at the oil, we are tweaking it a little bit so that it can eventually replace emulsifiers such as polyglycerol esters that are not very liked among consumers, and manufacturers are trying to change that particular ingredient. The challenge at the moment in order to do that is to reach a scale that would reduce our unit economics enough so that we can be competitive in price. On the fiber side, It's basically any specialty fiber or flour we can replace. But then on the downstream part, it gets more technical, but more interesting, in my opinion. We can replace some e-numbers that there are no current alternatives in the market, and those e-numbers are used in beverages, sauces, liqueurs, a lot of different things. And there is a current challenge with natural alternatives because they are not stable under low pH. And that's what we're trying to tackle. And this is our mentality, not only in food, but also in personal care and all the other industries, because we actually are stronger in personal care, or at least we have been. Now we're getting more deep into food because we have scale now. But yeah, our mentality is, rather than trying to push something that we make in the lab out of coffee, of course we see what is coffee made of, but then we look at the market, what is happening in the market across all of the industries that we work with. We ask customers, what are your problems? And then we come back to the lab and try to find solutions, like using coffee basically as a platform to solve things.
To solve problems. One of the things, and you've touched on it already, is the move throughout. It will be in personal care and cosmetics, but most definitely in food and drink, is this shift to more natural, less processed ingredients. One of the challenges when it comes to making that shift is often price is a significant barrier. How do your ingredients stack up, providing the natural alternative to something that is more synthetic? Are they price comparable?
The thing is, that's why we have been in the market we started the company 7 years ago, and we have been selling for about almost 4 years. And so we had to make that decision pretty early on. And that's what led us initially to personal care. Because weirdly, people are willing to pay more for a face cream than for what they eat. So we could sell the same compounds for higher prices. And because we had a lot less scale, then we needed to make the most out of what we had. So of course there's some investment that went into, because the personal care industry is a lot more focused on innovation. It's very innovation driven and clinical studies and all of that. So of course we invested in those to position the product or the ingredients in the market, and we unlocked their value proposition so that we could reach a certain price level. Now that we are in the process of building a biorefinery and opening it in October, then we have a lot more volume available, and that will drastically reduce our unit economics. So that will allow us to be more competitive in food. And when I'm in charge of making all the pricing models, and when I'm looking at the benchmarks in the market, there is usually a little premium, but we try to be as little premium, to make it as little premium as possible, because personally, I don't believe in premium prices for sustainable ingredients, simply because premium prices for sustainability defeats or contradicts the purpose of sustainability. If you only give sustainable products to the rich who can pay, then what is the point? However, because we're a small company, we don't have the costs yet that a huge company has, so that or maybe that is made through petrochemicals or synthetics. So of course we need to make a little margin. But the goal will always be to be competitive with synthetics and petrochemicals, rather than going with the trend of, if it's natural, then you have to pay triple, because that's not going to get us anywhere.
And you mentioned sustainability a number of times in our conversation so far. How do you build design, I guess, sustainability and circularity into the business model in all that you do? How do you approach that?
Everyday decision making, but also we are a B Corp certified corporation.
Mm-hmm.
We early on, when we founded Kaffe Bueno, we went through the B Corp impact assessment, which basically helped us look at some parameters that we would have otherwise neglected, maybe. And of course, like, we started the company with, it's not a company that is going now shifting to be sustainable like a lot of big companies.
Yeah.
We started because there was sustainable, in our opinion, there was a sustainability issue in the value chain that could be solved by upcycling our waste, and that is in itself sustainable. But then when you start looking into all of the processes and emissions and everything, then you need to take more decisions that will guarantee that it's more sustainable than the petrochemicals alternatives.
And what are
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, and what are some of those considerations that you need to bear in mind?
I mean, from how even we come to the office, like the mode of transport, how we ship things, how often do we ship things, how employees are traveling for business meetings and things like that, but also our processes. So water consumption, heat, any solvents that we might use, like any consumables, and how do we then, like, we design then processes that within our process, then there are some internal recycling processes, so that everything that we use, we then recycle it again in the process, and that also reduces the emissions.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any side streams from the process that you have?
No. There might be losses like in any production, but there are no side streams.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, we use 100% of the biomass.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I guess just touching on that, actually, are you starting with the grounds, the byproduct from coffee shops or industrial applications, and how do you kind of collect that? I'm imagining the byproduct that comes from a coffee shop, but is that the model that you use, and is that what you collect, or is it different to that?
Different. With coffee shops, it's complicated because it's usually very small amounts, and the hygiene standards are different, or not what we want. So as you know, when you make a cup of coffee, there's a lot of moisture.
Yeah.
So that makes it prone to mold growth. So we need to collect like very frequently, and we use some preservation methods to avoid mold. Like, most of our supply comes from industrial suppliers, so they have a lot of side streams, and we take that and we process them in-house. And then on the other hand, for different projects, like we call it circular partnerships, then we take the coffee grounds using an electric vehicle partner to collect the grounds from, let's say, from a hotel or an office, and then we use those specifically to extract the oil and then make a line of toiletries that go back to the hotel, and then the flour for the restaurant, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And is it only the grounds from the Arabica bean, or can you use Robusta, or is it specifically Arabica, and why?
In theory, we could use any type, but we decided to use Arabica only. Okay. And the reason for this is because the type of ingredients that the quality of the ingredients that we're producing need to be within a certain range. And although Arabica alone has 2,000 different varieties, and Robusta alone, a lot of them as well.
Yeah.
they are all very similar if you keep them, like if you segment it like that. So
Yeah.
Robusta yields a completely different range of molecules.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess that would make the whole operation much more challenging if you were managing different beans and combinations and so on. So it makes sense to focus and zero in on one.
And that's one of the main problems of that transition to natural, that the personal care and food industries are going on, they are experiencing right now. Because there are three main problems of transitioning to natural. One of them is the batch to batch quality and reliability.
Yeah.
So that's how we tackle that. Then it's underperformance, and then prices.
You mentioned farmers a couple of times, and how does the approach that you're taking, extracting this hidden value, how does that, I guess, new view on the value chain, how will that benefit farmers and communities in Colombia and other, I guess, coffee producing or growing parts of the world? How ultimately, well, in both the short and the long term?
Yeah, long term, and it's difficult to put a specific date on this.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we do this big enough, or if enough companies pop up and start using coffee in different ways, then the prices paid for the coffee to the farmers will have to grow, because everybody is going to be trying to make money out of coffee. The people who give us coffee now for free might want to start charging us at some point.
Yeah.
And that, you see. And then on the short medium term, we have developed a lot of innovative technologies that we know we can pass on to farmers to help them retain more value out of their crop by using the waste in their production in smarter ways. So both are a little bit long term, but one is longer than the other.
And do you see other and you're zeroing in on the waste or the byproduct that comes from the production of the drink, the grounds? But if you look across the coffee value chain, are there other opportunities, other points of hidden value across the whole value chain that you see?
Definitely, there's a lot of them. For example, in production, the husk or the pulp, that is, well, cascara, as you know it.
Yeah.
Of course, you can use it as cascara and like to make that tea that everybody's buzzing about. But I think more interestingly and more in the like within the prism that I'm looking at things, it has a lot of antioxidants. It has a layer of mucilage that is full with antioxidants, particularly chlorogenic acid. So it's interesting to look at that. Then also, most of the coffee in the world, the process is they're fully washed.
Yeah.
And that's like after depulping, then the green bean is covered in this mucilage. And then it's thrown in water for some hours and then taken off. But then that water usually is thrown away, but that water is gold.
Yeah.
And then they dry it and then they mill it, and then parchment comes along. And that parchment, I don't know a lot about the chemistry of the parchment, but I'm sure something can be done, at least maybe for biomaterials, biocomposites, something like that. Then also the silver skin in roasting. Like, there's so many things.
Yeah. So there's a lot more to go at.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other companies taking advantage of a few of these, like this company called Husky in Australia. They make cups out of the husk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What would your future vision for a coffee value chain of the future? What would that look like?
Funny question, because when we started Kaffe Bueno, we wanted to be like super vertically integrated. So we thought we could do everything from helping the farmers to running a coffee shop and then taking the grounds and doing this whole thing. But that is unfeasible. at least it would take like 50 years to do. But once we industrialize the use of these molecules, big players are gonna try to jump in, and they already have a vertically integrated supply chain. So actually, the way to close the loop is, well, I cannot disclose that because it's a project that we're doing. But some of the things that we do here have a lot of relevance and can solve a lot of problems for the farmers. And if we work, let's say, with a huge company, I'm not gonna say names, then if they are throughout their value chain, and then they might also have some food products and some personal care products, everything can come from the same supply chain.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And thinking at a high level, what does a future food system look like for you, and what role does Kaffe Bueno play in that system? And also, I think we're very good at talking about progress, but what's stopping us doing it faster and quicker? Which seems very urgent.
Well, some deep questions there. I'm going to try to answer all of them. So the future of food, well, from right now, 40% of food is wasted. So of course, that's one of the biggest problems. And then coupled with the fact that the suitable land for farming is decreasing and an increasing population, like what is going to happen? Then that brings to light vertical farming in order to make cities self-sustainable, decrease transport emissions and costs. That is definitely key, I think. Coffee is very difficult to grow in a vertical farm, but I mean, that's not one of the crops that I'm thinking that could be used for that. On the other hand, how to avoid that amount of waste is of implementing AI in the purchasing processes to avoid surplus. And then implementing better systems to give that food waste to companies that make better use of them, instead of just biogas and all of this anaerobic digestion that is a lot of emissions. Also, there are some companies that are popping up that serve as marketplaces of byproducts. So that, I think, is also going to drive the scale up of a lot of companies like Kaffe Bueno. And also, like, in-house within retail, refilling of products, so you don't have to get new packaging. And better packaging production. Like, there's so many things around that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what do you think is stopping progress? What, in your experience? Obviously, you're challenging norms and conventions and processes, so you have a unique view on, why aren't we moving faster and quicker, do you think?
Well, there's a couple of barriers. One of them is current industry standards. Like, you might see in the news a lot of companies, the big ones, the small ones, particularly the big ones, saying that, like, promoting their innovation and openness and sustainable goals and so on. But then when you talk to the R&D people or the people in charge of making this happen, a lot of them are constrained by their experience, basically, because they have been doing this in a certain way for 50, 30, 40 years, and they are highly reluctant to make a change. So, for example, in the cosmetics industry, they all want to transition to natural, but then you talk to a formulator and they want everything to be white or transparent, but nothing in nature is white or transparent. So those little things are hindering the shift. On the other hand, regulation, particularly in Europe, such as the novel food legislation, that makes no sense to me. How come are you incentivizing, or how are you supposed to incentivize innovation if everything has to be looked through the realm of what was consumed before 1997? So how can we bring in new things to the market if that is in place? And well, technology, technology is the drivers rather than the driver rather than the blockage.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
enabler, isn't it? Yeah. A couple of questions and relate to technology, but perhaps from a different perspective. How do you feel about cellular coffee? So coffee made without coffee.
I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I think it's solution that was born through by looking at the future, because there is a study from Fairtrade that came out like in 2017, where they say that the suitable land for coffee growing is going to be cut by half in 2050 due to global warming. So of course it's natural that we try to make coffee without the crop, or not we, but humans, because coffee demand is not going to go anywhere. But then you are solving that problem, but then you are making a huge other problem. There's about 125 million families or people that depend on coffee growing to do that. So it is,
it's a difficult one. You solve one problem, but it's an unintended consequence of perhaps trying to do the right thing, but creating a massive issue somewhere else, shifting.
And I mean, it doesn't mean that, like, I'm not opposed to the idea of the role of farmers shifting, because at the end of the day, the question is, should we, as humans in anything we do, should we prioritize the survival of nature or the survival of humanity? And of course, in my opinion, should be of nature. So if some humans have to change their roles in society to fit that purpose, I think it's a good thing. But of course, in the transition period, there will be a lot that suffer.
Yeah, and perhaps the question is, how are those farmers, those skills, those knowledge, all of that craft, how can that be repurposed into, I guess, the a new industry, the new coffee industry potentially, I guess.
I mean, and it's all very nice to think about all of those scenarios, but in reality, if cellular coffee becomes the norm, they are not going to go to farmers. They are not going to do anything with farmers, because cellular coffee is not happening in the coffee producing countries. It's happening in the coffee demanding countries.
Yeah, consuming countries. Yeah. Can I circle right back round to we've talked a lot about the products and how, but what about the why? For you, what, and your co-founders, what's the purpose behind Kaffe Bueno? What is it you're trying to do at a why level?
To change how the world sees coffee. Instead of looking at it as a beverage, to look at it as a plant and as a sustainable resource to phase out petrochemicals and synthetics from your everyday products.
Yeah, okay. Can I ask what's next? You're obviously on a super exciting journey. What are the exciting things that are upcoming? What can we look forward to? What's next?
Well, September, October this year, we're inaugurating the world's first coffee biorefinery, and we're scaling up from like 10, 20 tons a year to now 500 tons a year. And we are launching a lot of new ingredients, some patented solutions that have shown serious promise to really phase out some petrochemicals and synthetics from some industries. Different health-oriented solutions for sure. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving to an like commercialization expansion. Now we are basically everywhere. So yeah.
And which leads us, I guess, really nicely on to, if people are not only inspired by your story, but want to get involved and get in touch to explore the possibilities of applying your products in this case, in food and drink. How do people go about doing that?
Well, there are some brands that use our ingredients in different countries. You can also, for example, Nivea has some products in Germany, France, Brazil, with our oil. The Body Shop has some products as well, and maybe 20 other companies. Maybe we can make a list to share.
Yeah.
And I mean, keep up, follow us, and we will tell you how to contribute.
Yeah, fine. That's great. That's brilliant. Alessandro, that concludes this episode of the Food People in Conversation With. I think on behalf of us all at the Food People and the In Conversation With audience, thanks so much for joining me today and for sharing in the journey so far, which feels like it's only just the beginning. And I think a real eye-opener for us all. You know, many of us consume coffee as part of our daily ritual, but I'm pretty sure most people listening wouldn't have seen it much more than a caffeinated beverage. So thank you for opening our eyes and just telling a little bit of that story today. It's been really insightful. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for opening this platform, because, well, I think if anybody listening or watching this, if by the end of this they have changed their perception of coffee, this is basically what we're trying to do with Kaffe Bueno. So the job is done. So thank you for allowing us to do that.
That's brilliant. So do join our TFP community for the details of our latest In Conversation With episodes, as well as the latest free-to-access food and drink trends foresight. Visit thefoodpeople.co.uk and complete your details at the footer of the page. On behalf of Alejandro and myself, thanks very much for listening to this Food People in Conversation With episode. Join with us in the trends of today and the foresight tomorrow to shift the future of food and drink. And I leave you with one question as always: how are you shifting the future of food and drink? Thanks for listening.